All right, what is the name of the book, Seth, that we're reading?
Time to go. Little Tyke.
Little Tyke, yes. And what's the story about, Abigail?
Why would we want to a little lion?
A little lion. Was it a baby? Okay. Have they told you anything about, let's see, we just read the first chapter. I wasn't here when you read it. About the way the...
chapter over again.
Anyway, little Tyke was they got the little lion as a baby, and they have to raise it, right? Okay. The next chapter is called Little Tyke and Pinky. We'll find out who Pinky is. About 3 months before little Tyke was born, our tabby cat had given birth to kittens in the attic of our old garage. When I climbed up to have a look at them, I noticed that one of the little fellows was completely hairless. I thought at first it was a pack rat, for pack rats are born without hair, and their skin is bright pink. But this little fellow grew, but as this little fellow grew, she had a beautiful long hair that was different in color from any I'd ever seen, a light pink. Abigail would like that. As time went on, she developed a beautiful white ruff around her neck. Very appropriately, we named her Pinky. When we brought little Tyke to Hidden Valley Ranch, Pinky took a like to her. When we brought little Tyke to Hidden Valley Ranch, Pinky took to her like a leech. Wherever we found little Tyke, we also found Pinky, at play or asleep on top of a soft chair. Every day when we drove to our plant, little Tyke and Pinky went along. There they played together in the living quarters to the sound of soft radio music until they were very tired and sleepy. They usually slept on the sofa, curled up together. Little Tyke's bottle of milk was an easy chore for us. We opened a can of evaporated milk and mixed it half and half with warm water from the faucet. Little Tyke soon learned to listen for the sound of running water when she was hungry. When we arrived home at Hidden Valley Ranch in the evening, my first chore was to place little Tyke and Pinky in the living room of the ranch house. Little Tyke always made straight for the fireplace, and every day she seemed surprised that the fire was not burning. She immediately began pacing up and down before the fireplace until I rolled in a huge alder log and started a blazing fire, like a routine act in a play. She then dragged her little silk cushion close and dove into the middle of it. From there she would peer at me through large eyes, so large for such a little creature, as if to say, "That's the way a well-trained master should act." When she was 3 months old, the wound in little Tyke's leg was definitely healing. She learned to romp and play as she favored the splinted leg. But here was another problem. Little Tyke should be starting on solid food. We removed most of her rubber toys, leaving only her favorite doll, and replaced them with bones from freshly killed beef. One sniff of the bones was too much for little Tyke. She immediately regurgitated all the food in her stomach. Later, she learned to take some baby cereal mixed with her milk. But as we attempted to wean her and give her meat without success, we were alarmed as we thought of the reports of scientists who claimed that carnivorous animals, such as the lion, cannot live without meat. We set ourselves to the task of teaching little Tyke to acquire an appetite for meat. Margaret wrote to the curator of a New York zoo for help, and this woman advised us to put a few drops of blood in little Tyke's milk bottle. We did, but she would not touch it. We tried 10 drops, then 5, and even one drop, but still little Tyke would have no part of it. Someone suggested that we mix hamburger and milk in the palm of one hand and plain milk in the other. Then let her lap the milk first and swiftly change to the hand that held milk and hamburger. I tried this, but little Tyke turned away quickly, even though she was hungry. I wiped my hands on a nearby butcher's towel and picked the cub up in my arms, but the odor of the meat on my hands made her ill. She sensed the danger smell of blood and hissed with fear in her eyes as she cringed in the corner of the sofa. I then washed my hands thoroughly, prepared a new bottle of milk, and picked up little Tyke and her favorite doll. She nursed contentedly and went on to sleep on her pillow with Pinky. When Christmas Eve came and we had great plans for everyone, including little Tyke, the family gathering was to be at my wife's folks' place in the city. That evening, while I worked out front in the plant, Margaret went back into the living quarters to take a shower so we could leave the festivities directly from the shop. We used a coal range for both cooking and heating, so after making a hot fire in the range, Margaret took a shower before feeding little Tyke and Pinky. Little Tyke associated the running water with her feeding time, so when she heard the shower going, she sat up, started toward the running water at the other end of the room. She would rather jump from one piece of furniture to another than walk on the floor. This time she jumped from the sofa where she had been sleeping to a low kitchen cupboard, and then directly upon the red-hot cook stove. There was a blood-curdling scream. I dashed in to find the little creature writhing in the floor in terrible pain. Margaret had reached the scene first, and she had seen little Tyke fall from the stove, where she had left the skin from all four pads of her feet and a 4 by 6 inch strip from her tummy. We speeded all the medical aid possible, but needless to say, that Christmas was a sad one for us. Little Tyke was less than 4 months old, had had her second painful accident. After the veterinarians had swathed her in medicated pads, we took her home to the ranch, where we lined a large paper carton with absorbent cotton for her bed. Pinky stuck by her side, licking and comforting her as best she knew how. When Pam gave way to a few minutes of sleep, Pinky jumped out of the box to catch up on her sleep, but she remained close to the box. When little Tyke awakened and began crying, Pinky jumped back to her pal and began her licking and soothing all over again. This routine was repeated about every 15 minutes through the night. Now the uphill grind to health began all over again. After approximately 6 weeks, little Tyke again took her first step on those sore feet. She had been thoroughly housebroken at 2 months. But after lying helpless those long weeks without the use of her feet, she had to be trained all over again. One evening we closed shop and drove home to Hidden Valley Ranch to do the chores. Then, when we went out for a drive, for some reason we did not take Pinky along, even though she loved to ride in the car with us. That was the last time we saw Pinky. Everyone wanted this unusual cat, and apparently some folks took her from the ranch that evening while we were away. I believe they would have brought her back to little Tyke if they could have seen her hunt and cry for her. During the ensuing months, she mourned the loss of her pal, eating little food and losing weight. She began so weak and thin that we were afraid she would die. She didn't want the company of other cats. She wanted only Pinky. Whenever a new cat came across her path, she always showed keen interest and hurriedly approached to smell it. But when it wasn't Pinky, she always turned away with the same mournful look. After 9 long months, we removed the last splint and bandage. At first, little Tyke seemed to lack the courage to put her full weight of 65 pounds on the unsupported leg. But she soon learned to romp and play with the other animals at the ranch. Next chapter is Chased by Dogs.